Cyber Monday live question and answer session. Obviously, Cyber Monday is typically about buying things online, looking for bargains, online shopping, and all that sort of stuff. We thought it was a perfect opportunity to talk to you about cybercrime, cyber safety, cyber fraud, and things that you can do to help keep yourself safe. We've got a great panel tonight, people to answer all of your questions, and we'll come to them shortly so they can introduce themselves. But first, I thought we'd talk about why we're actually here. I'm going to share some slides with you now and show you some of the statistics around cybercrime in the UK, give you a feel for really how big that problem actually is. So, law enforcement in the UK, we class cybercrime in two different ways. We have cyber dependent crime, that's computer versus computer hacking, ransomware, various malwares, and things like that. We also have cyber enabled crime. So this is any form of crime that can be carried out or enhanced in terms of its scale and scope through the use of a computer. Phishing emails, romance scams, mandate frauds, things along those lines. So to give you an idea for how big the issue really is nowadays, let's take a look at some of the figures from the crime survey for England and Wales. So in the year ending December 2020 rather, now, 1.7 million people had reported falling victim to some sort of Computer Misuse Act offence. In that same time period, 4.5 million people had reported falling victim to some sort of fraud. It's estimated that 80% of fraud in the UK is cyber enabled in one way or another. So that's going to be roughly 3.7 million cyber fraud reports there. If we add those figures together, we've got 5.3 million cyber crimes occurring in the UK in just 1 year alone. We have a look at the figures that Action Fraud receive. In that year ending 2020, £2.7 billion was lost in the UK. I think in the last 12 months, there's around £2.5 billion lost as well. So for 2021, we're on course for similar sort of figures. In Dorset alone, in that time period, more than 6,000 people reported falling victim to cybercrime and lost collectively £22.2 million. Problem is, cybercrime often goes unreported. It's estimated that roughly 1 in 10 of those crimes get reported to Action Fraud, so we're really only seeing a fraction of what's going on. To bear that in mind, obviously, £2.7 billion worth of loss for Action Fraud's records, probably actually going to be a little bit more than that because we don't really know the true scope of what's happening. I'll show you this here. This graph comes from Action Fraud, and it's the total reports of fraud and cybercrime in 1 year. Official reports 492,562, a fraction of the 5.3 million that the crime survey for England and Wales captured. Obviously, something's making people not report. Be keen to figure out what. So if you do have any thoughts on that, feel free to chuck in a comment under this post. Again, like I said, £2.5 billion worth of loss this year in the UK. This chart shows us the different types of crime, the top 5 brackets of cybercrime or fraud in the UK at the moment. Rather unhelpfully, this big green one here, none of the above, quite a broad categorization. We can look to the next column, the big blue one, the single biggest type of online crime at the moment, online shopping and auction scams. Now, very fitting what with being Cyber Monday and Black Friday being just a couple of days ago. Obviously, a lot of people turning to the internet trying to bag a bargain. I see a perfect time for cyber criminals to try and trip some of us up. In terms of who is actually being targeted with cybercrime, this chart here shows a breakdown of victims by age around the UK. As you can see, most likely to be targeted with cybercrime between the ages of 20 and 40 years old. Now, it's probably this misconception that many of us have that you're more likely to be targeted as you get older, maybe more likely to fall victim in the latter years. But actually, obviously, these figures don't really reflect that. Completely different truth here. People who probably consider themselves digital natives, let's say, people who are used to using the internet, maybe feel a bit more confident and subsequently let their guard down a bit more readily when they're online, are actually the people who are losing the most money. And again, we can see down the bottom here, second column, biggest single crime type, online shopping and auction frauds. Big area of business for us at the moment. This here is specifically the losses and reports of online shopping and auction fraud for that 1 year period. So in the UK in 1 year, £15.1 million was lost to online shopping and auction fraud. 187 reports there. As right down the bottom, you can see that little chart, the little graph there. It says October, November, December. Smack bang in the middle, we can see there's that spike around November, typically when people are probably going to start their online shopping for Christmas. Surveys earlier this year said that roughly, I think it was 49% of people planned on doing their their Christmas shopping rather, exclusively online this year. So easy pickings for cyber criminals. And that's why we're here today. I want to talk to you about cyber safety, hopefully answer your questions about cybercrime and fraud, give you some tips how you can keep yourself safe, basically, how you can do your online shopping as safely and securely as possible, and just a little bit of guidance about fraud in general too. So let's introduce our panel. I'm going to start off by introducing Detective Sergeant Adam Pilton from the Dorset Police Cybercrime Unit. Adam, care to introduce yourself?
Good evening. So as Chris has kindly introduced, I'm Detective Sergeant Adam Pilton. I lead the cybercrime team, so I work closely with Chris and the other investigators, detectives that we have on the cybercrime team. Our job essentially is to investigate cybercrime, but also the action field referrals that we get. We look into those, work with other forces, other agencies to identify the cyber criminals out there and hopefully bring them to justice.
Excellent, thank you, Adam. We also have with us Detective Inspector Andy Kennard from our Economic Crime Unit.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm Detective Inspector Andrew Kennard. I manage the Economic Crime Unit for Dorset Police, and I'm the tactical lead for Dorset for fraud. And so the reason I'm here this evening is that whilst, as Chris has already pointed out, whilst not all cyber crimes are fraud related, many frauds are cyber related. And so I'm just here to make sure that I can answer any fraud questions that you have this evening.
Thank you, Andy. And lastly, we have with us Mr. David Sidwick, Dorset Police and Crime Commissioner.
Hello, everyone. So my job is to represent the people. I've just finished the Police and Crime Plan. It came out the end of October, and there's a whole chunk in it about trying to improve the way we look at cybercrime in order to try and keep us safer for the future. So I'm here on your behalf to see what's going on.
Thank you very much. So we have a fair few pre-submitted questions which we're going to start off with this evening. Hopefully we'll get a few more live ones coming in as we progress. So we're going to turn to the first one, and that question's come in as who is most likely to be targeted by cybercrime? A moment ago, obviously, we took a look at that graph that showed actually in your younger years, maybe you're more likely to fall victim. But the truth is there is actually a scam out there for everybody. Maybe in your later years, you're not going to be looking to invest in cryptocurrency, for example. However, if that is your cup of tea, there's every chance you're going to get caught with a cryptocurrency scam. You might feel when you're younger, you know how to spot a phishing email. You know those things that come through from your bank saying that something wrong with your account aren't genuine, but perhaps again, further down the line, that might be something that slips through the net because you might panic a little bit more readily. Truth be told, there isn't really a character profile for who's actually going to fall victim. As long as you've got somebody out there who's trying to trip somebody up, putting the effort in to craft their messages, craft their scam emails, they'll find a target. No matter who you are, there will be something out there one day that might test your defenses, might find its way through, and unfortunately might cause you some sort of problems. That's why we obviously try to get to as many people as we can through cyber protect campaigns and our public speaking engagements and things in force. We always try and cover basically as many groups as possible. So if you are a business representative, you run a community group or anything like that, do get in touch. Obviously, we can run cyber awareness sessions, tell you what to look out for. We'll tailor those sessions as well to make sure the advice is as appropriate as it can be for you. Second question we have is for our PCC, and that is, what does the PCC plan to do to tackle cybercrime in Dorset?
Well, thanks, Chris. I mean, I think probably the best way of talking about this is to actually pick out some of the pieces from the Police and Crime Plan. So I'm very clear that the best thing we can do is actually a whole heap of stuff around prevention. If we can prevent and help everyone from not falling victim of the scammers, then it makes complete sense. So we're going to be increasing the awareness and confidence in reporting of cybercrime offences. If we can do that, then what we get is we get greater intelligence around the criminals and also the techniques that we're doing, that they're using. So we can then share that amongst us so we are better protected. And it is also about taking some of the people which Chris just discussed. I'd like to make certain that we have more information for our schools, our universities, our young people. I also have started talking to our business community, because the business sector is also an area which can be prone to cybercrime, and some of that can be quite significant. So I'd like to make certain that actually staff are trained and we embed a concept of risk management around cybercrime with our businesses. And finally, to make more noise and get more prevention out there for older people and the vulnerable, particularly victims who may need help talking to their bank or building societies because they've lost money. So there's a number of things that we can do, and that's in the Police and Crime Plan.
Excellent. Thank you, David. So our next question is, what support is in place to help victims of cyber fraud? And are people ever likely to get their money back? So I'm going to throw to Detective Sergeant Adam Pilton for this one. If you can take that first part for us, what support is there for people who fall victim to cybercrime?
Thank you, Chris. So action fraud, as most people I imagine would have heard of, they refer to us every week, the reports they receive. Now, every single action fraud report that Dorset Police Cybercrime Unit receives, we contact them individually, we investigate their crime, but also we offer them cyber security advice, whether that be one of the investigators in the office or Chris speaking with you. Now, that is either in-person environment, whatever suits the individual. But everybody will have tailored cybersecurity advice given to them to make sure that A, they can recover the situation they find themselves in, but also prevent anything like that happening again. Also, Chris, our Cyber Protect officer, does offer a free service where he comes out, whether it be to businesses, whether it be to public events, but certainly group events. He will come out and offer cybersecurity training to groups of people, and that is something that's advertised on our internet site. We work very closely with the Southwest Cyber Resilience Centre. Now, this, again, they've got their own website, so you can see further details on their website. But the Cyber Resilience Centre work very closely with local businesses and can offer cybersecurity advice for the very moment you're in, but also looking forward as well, to help you protect or help businesses protect themselves. So we work very closely with those as well. In terms of the second part of the question there, are people ever likely to get their money back? As I say, we have a number of detectives working on our team that look into every single investigation to make sure every single inquiry that is available to us is exploited, whether this be us conducting our own work or work with other organizations, other agencies to achieve that. And that includes action fraud and other police forces. And when we are looking at criminal justice outcomes, then of course every time we're looking to resolve any wrongs done, whether that be returning money or whatever it may be. So that is always forefront of our mind when we're looking at criminal justice outcomes.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam. Andy, I don't know if you have anything to add about recovering money for conventional fraud as well as cyber fraud.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the Economic Crime Unit is the Financial Investigation Unit, and their remit, their top priority is, and the top priority in my delivery plan for that unit is to use our police powers under the Proceeds of Crime Act to compensate victims of crime. Now, obviously, in order to do that, we have to reach a criminal justice outcome, so a conviction at court, in order to be able to use those powers. And we'll do that wherever we can. But as Mr. Sidwick said, it's far better if we can try to prevent people from becoming victims in the first place. And that's why events like this are so important, to try and raise awareness of the issues and to try and give people the information that they need to prevent them becoming victims of crime in the first place. And just to put into context very quickly, the journey that you go on if you had been a victim of fraud and lost funds. If you've ever been the victim of a fraud, hopefully you'll have reported that to Action Fraud. Now, what happens at Action Fraud is that they will assess the information you provide them, and it's only if there's sufficient information for an investigation to commence that your crime will be allocated to a force. And just because you live in Dorset, it doesn't mean that your crime will be allocated to Dorset Police to investigate. It'll go to the most relevant force where the offender is located, or where the suspect resides. So you've got lots of hurdles to get over before your crime will even be allocated for investigation to a force area, and it won't be the force area where you live in most cases. And so even once you get it allocated, that force then has to investigate it and reach a positive criminal justice outcome for there to be any chance of recovering those funds through the Proceeds of Crime Act. So absolutely, we do that wherever we possibly can. But there are many hurdles before we can get to that stage. And so prevention is by far the best way of making sure that you don't lose the funds.
Thank you, Andrew. So our next question, how do you stop spam emails? I've tried moving them to a junk folder or blocking sender email addresses, but it doesn't seem to make a difference. I think I'll take this one. It is very tricky. Obviously, the nature of the internet, it's very easy to start up a new email account or yeah, have a fake email address that you can just spin up a new one and start sending out fake emails over and over again. It does seem a little bit frustrating, obviously, when you block someone, flag it as spam, get rid of that email, and then bang, something comes through a little bit later on. The way we report fraud and cybercrime, phishing emails nowadays, rather, has changed. It used to be that you go to Action Fraud to make those reports. Recently, however, the NCSE have launched the Suspicious Email Reporting Service, SERS. It's an automated system where you simply forward your suspicious emails to the NCSE. They analyze them, and if they deem it to be malicious, they'll work to have websites shut down, email addresses and email accounts closed down. I think the last check, I think as of October, they'd had something like 80,000 scams shut down, over 100,000 websites pulled from the internet as well. And it's all because people have taken the time to report to the Suspicious Email Reporting Service. Really couldn't be easier to do either. All you need to do to make that report is forward your emails. So click the forward, a little arrow, and send that to report@phishing.gov.uk. That again, that's report@phishing.gov.uk. Get an acknowledgement. It will tell you that they're going to start looking into it and they'll do a bit of work. And then hopefully, obviously, if it's deemed to be malicious, that website will be taken down and you shouldn't be hearing from them again anytime soon. Makes a real difference in terms of how safe the internet is for you and other people. Obviously, the criminals can go start up a new account and start going again, but it really does slow them down. It makes a big difference to how effective they can be and how safe you can be as well. So move on to the next question. I think I'm going to fire this one over to Detective Sergeant Adam Pilton. What is cryptocurrency? Is it secure and protected?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. So, cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is a digital currency, and it's decentralized. So, the normal currency we used to, Great British pounds, that is centralized, as our banks, the Bank of England, control that. However, with cryptocurrency, so Bitcoin is the most famous probably. With Bitcoin, that is decentralized. Not one individual organization own or control that. It's controlled by a group of people. And the transactions, every single transaction ever conducted is recorded on what is known as the public ledger. That way, everybody, the group involved with the cryptocurrency can agree that these transactions are true and accurate. In terms of, is it secure and is it protected? Well, in terms of being protected, no, it's not, because there isn't one central body that will refund you or look into any cases. It's completed, as I say, by a group of people. And is it secure? I would say it is secure in terms of everything is conducted on a public ledger, so you can see every transaction. However, you can use it, or you do use it, anonymously. So there is an element of risk there. What I would say with cryptocurrency, again, if you're confident with it and you do your research into it, then it can be used, and you can use cryptocurrency via exchanges. So that's something you need to look into. But as Chris mentioned earlier on, every single person there is a scam for, and it's the same with cryptocurrency. There is a scam for multiple scams for cryptocurrency as well. So we can't just rely on the fact that it's secure. We too, as the users, have to make sure we use it securely and we fully understand what we're doing.
Thank you, Adam. So the next question, actually, we have two on a similar theme. So we've been asked, what actually is two-factor authentication? And then Lucy on Facebook has asked, do I actually need 2FA if my passwords are strong? So if you're not sure what two-factor authentication is, in a nutshell, it's essentially a safety net for your online accounts. So if you've ever used online banking, you'll be familiar with the card reader that you need to use. You enter your card, obviously enter some transaction details and your PIN number, and it gives you back a 6 or an 8-digit code that you need to enter to make that transaction go through. That is essentially two-factor authentication. You can apply this now on social media, your email accounts, online shopping accounts. Any good website really ought to let you use two-factor authentication, or 2FA for short, to secure your account. Most common way to use it would be through text messaging. So SMS-based 2FA is comfortably the most prominent form. And what will happen is when you enter your email address and your password on, let's say, Facebook, for example, you'll get a text message from Facebook because you'll have to give them your phone number to be able to implement it. And in that text message will be a 6-digit code. So you enter your email address and your password, your code comes through, you enter that code, and then that tells them that you are who you say you are because you're in possession of your phone. In theory, you should be the only person who can get that code because you should be the only person with that device. There are some flaws with text message 2FA. Obviously, if someone else has your phone, they can get your code, but they'd also have to know your email address and your password, obviously, for them to be able to use it effectively. If you have particularly high value accounts or you're particularly security minded, you might want to use a token, something like a YubiKey or Google Titan key. There's a couple of different physical tokens you can use for 2FA. Probably the better option, a nice middle ground, is to use an authenticator app. Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator. There are a few of them in your app store of choice. There, all you have to do is set that account up, and it has this constantly refreshes, rather. So every 30 seconds, it will generate a new code. And that code is replicated at the other end, basically, with whatever company it is you've set two-factor authentication up with. So you take that code, enter that onto the login portal, and again, through communication between the two servers, they tally those two numbers up, they know they're the same, and they trust that you are who you say you are. As for Lucy's question, do you actually need it if your passwords are strong? Absolutely. Absolutely everyone should be using two-factor authentication. It would probably cut out easily 90% of the reports that come through our desks each week, because most of them are about account takeovers, people losing control of their Facebook or their email accounts, for example. Now, that'll happen through phishing emails. You fall for a phishing email, you hand over your email address and your password. That's all someone needs to be able to log into your account. But if you have 2FA in place, they have that extra layer of protection that they have to work through. And if you're using an authenticator app or a token, it's borderline impossible for them to do. Text message, obviously, there are ways that they can do it, but they're extremely advanced and very, very involved. And to take over somebody's social media account, it's very unlikely they're actually going to do it. So text message based 2FA is infinitely better than no 2FA. So no matter how good your passwords are, you may still fall for a phishing email one day. It might be that one of the companies that you signed up for an account with has a data breach, and your email addresses and your passwords and all that sort of stuff are taken. And obviously, then it doesn't matter how good your password is; it's in the wrong person's hands. 2FA would help cut that out. So no matter how good your passwords are, absolutely always be using 2FA to protect your accounts. So our next question from Sophie on Facebook: is there any telltale signs of fake scam websites? What are the things we should be looking out for? You can do a few things with a website. Obviously, best thing you can do is to rely on its reputation. So if there's something that you're looking for, say you're looking for a particular product, if you were to search for that, there's a strong chance the top few listings on your search engine of choice would be a reputable website. So if you look for a particular product, you'll probably see the manufacturer's website. You go down a couple, maybe find Amazon and those other sort of retailers there. As soon as you start getting a bit further down to areas that you're not particularly sure, websites that you don't really recognize, that's when you want to exercise a little bit of caution. If you're really not sure about a website, be quite wary of it. What you can do, obviously, is put the name of that website into a search engine and then specifically search for reviews. So if you were to say Amazon.co.uk reviews, you'd find, say, a Trustpilot link or something like that, and you'd find out about other people's experiences with that website. That is probably the best indication as to whether or not something's going to be genuine, because if someone else has been scammed there, they'll probably turn to a platform like that to leave a review about it, and bang, you can find out. There are tools you can use to look at the reputation of a website or find out when they were set up. They're fairly involved, but like I say, the best way to do it is just to look for those reviews from other people. Things to bear in mind, though, if you are looking for stuff, particularly coming up to Christmas, a lot of products that people really want, say your kids are after a particular toy or something like that, you might find they're out of stock everywhere. If people are selling them, they might be very, very expensive to buy through your reselling websites, eBay, Facebook Marketplace. You might land on a website that just mysteriously happens to have stock. Maybe it's something that's a little bit cheaper than it would usually be. Treat that with take that with a pinch of salt, rather. If you see a website that just happens to have that thing that nobody else has, and it's 5, 10, 15 pounds cheaper, there's a golden rule when it comes to online shopping: if a deal seems too good to be true, it probably is. So just consider that. Make sure you do your research. If you're really not satisfied a website is genuine, maybe just think about looking elsewhere, or just accept the fact that you might not be buying that product this year. Okay, what else do we have? Our next question. My elderly parents are never sure if emails they get from banks, etc., are scams or not. They had one today, supposedly from Yahoo, asking them to update email details. Is there an easy way of finding out? Now, there are a few things we can do with emails, particularly if you're using them on your computer, even if you're using them on your mobile phone, actually. Simply the best thing that you can do is to expand that box at the top. So you'll usually see the email address at the top of the screen and the username next to it. And there'll be an arrow, something that will say either expand, see more, something like that, a couple of little arrows to drop down. If you click on that, you'll often see the full email address that has been used to send that email. Now, quite a lot of the time when it comes to scam emails, they'll give themselves a username, let's say Microsoft support, say, and it's an email telling you that there's something wrong with your Hotmail account, Outlook account rather, that's the Microsoft one. So something wrong with your Outlook account, and it's Microsoft support. Click that, expand that box at the top, and if it says support at Microsoft.com, that's Microsoft. If it says anything else, or something that really does not look right, say it's a Gmail or a Hotmail account or something that's clearly just been set up for free, that's your red flag straight away. Yeah, so look at that email address, see if it adds up. Is it what you'd expect the genuine support from Microsoft or whatever company it is to look like? Other things we can do, if you hover your mouse over any buttons or links in an email, you'll get a box pop up, usually in the middle of the screen or in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And that will show you the true destination of that button. So let's say, for example, we get an email that is asking you to change your Gmail password or something like that. So you have a button that says log into Google. If you hover your mouse over that and it says anything other than www.google.com or accounts.google.com or anything like that, don't click it. Simply put, if an website rather doesn't look how you would expect it to, just assume that it's not going to be genuine. The other things, fairly obvious signs, the dodgy spelling and grammar. I always hasten to use that as an example because I'm sure I've sent some emails where the spelling and grammar is absolutely terrible. However, if you get one of those emails from Amazon and they give you a generic greeting, dear sir, dear madam, dear valued customer, or just dear customer, something like that, or you've got really bad grammar and syntax, or the spelling's wrong throughout the email, straight away there's your red flags there as well. Like I say, the key thing to look for really is looking at those email addresses at the top, hovering your mouse over those links to making sure you're satisfied they're genuine. If you're not, don't click on that link. If it's from your bank as well, another thing worth bearing in mind, it's almost never worth following a link in an email from your bank because it's so easy just to open up another window and then go to that address bar at the top and put in www.whateveryourbank.is.co.uk and go directly to that website yourself. So don't rely on being directed there from an email. Just go to that website yourself because you know where you're going, you know what you're typing in, and you're much less likely to get scammed that way. So our next question from Emma: can you get protection for your mobile phone rather, like you do your computers/laptops? Can your phone get hacked or a virus? Absolutely, it can. It depends really on what sort of device you're using. Some devices are more susceptible than others. As a rule of thumb, Apple handsets, iPads, things like that, there aren't really viruses per se for them, and it's all to do with how the file structure on those devices works. Now, we're running the risk here of getting a little bit too involved and too technical, so I'll be very careful not to. If you use an Apple phone, though, it can't really be affected in quite the same way as your computer, your laptop, or an Android device might. That's not to say they're completely invulnerable, though. So you still have to be careful. There are still vulnerabilities in the operating system that can be exploited. So when you get those updates, that little red button in your options menu, if they're telling you there's an update available, do it. Because if you were to read the small print of that update, you'd probably find a dozen or more ways in which people have been able to find a way into that device without your permission. That's the word. And they are releasing fixes basically within those updates to stop people exploiting those vulnerabilities. So yes, they can be hacked. They're less likely to be hacked than, say, an Android device might be. As for Android, completely safe usually if you're sticking to places like the Google Play Store, or if you're on an Android Samsung Galaxy device, for example, the Galaxy App Store. And that's because they do a lot of work to make sure those apps are vetted. So they'll check apps with, I think it's called Play Protect on the Google Store. They'll be vetted to make sure those apps aren't doing anything they shouldn't be doing. Again, not foolproof. Sometimes things do slip through the net. So you might find something in there that isn't quite what you'd expect it to be. So read the reviews on those apps. Again, do your research. If you don't need the app, don't have it. If you have apps on your phone that you're not using, delete them, because again, it just opens up doors rather for people to find their way into your device. Best thing you can do, make sure if it's an Android device, you have some form of antivirus software on there. So all your big hitters, Norton, McAfee, Kaspersky, AVG, there are others. They'll offer versions of their antivirus software that you can use on your mobile phone. It's always worth having them there because they can do other things for you too. So they can check the security of a Wi-Fi hotspot. They can help you get rid of junk files from your phone, and more importantly, obviously, they scan things, websites, and downloads as you're accessing them to make sure they aren't doing anything they shouldn't be doing. One other thing to bear in mind with devices, if you have an Android phone and you've turned on developer mode, you might be opening yourself up to a few problems potentially if you do something wrong. Another thing, if you jailbreak your iPhone or root your Android handset, so you can start, they call it side loading, so downloading apps from other sources other than your usual Play Store. Again, potentially opening yourself up to problems there too. Um, it offers some benefits, but as a rule of thumb, we'd always suggest probably not jailbreaking or rooting a device unless you're really, really confident you know what you're doing, simply because you open up so many potential vulnerabilities in your phone. We're going to go for a question to Andy. Andy, do you actively investigate fraud or just record statistics?
Hi, thanks for that question. So yes, we do actively investigate fraud. So within Dorset Police, we have a really great team called the Fraud Triage Team. They're a small team of highly skilled specialist fraud investigators, and they review every fraud that comes into Dorset Police, either with the view to see if anyone needs safeguarding, and if they do, they pass those through to something called Ops Signature, which is delivered by our neighbourhood policing teams, where local officers will come out and deliver fraud and cyber safeguarding to people that need it. They look to see whether a crime needs to be transferred to another force area for investigation. So as I mentioned earlier, if crimes have been reported directly to action fraud will make the assessment as to where those crimes should be allocated for investigation. But sometimes cases come in directly to Dorset Police, maybe because there's a vulnerable victim, or it may be that there's some inquiries that need to take place before we identify where the suspect resides, and so they will look then to move those investigations onto the relevant force areas. But then the cases that do sit with Dorset Police to investigate will be reviewed by the fraud triage team, and then they'll be allocated out either to territorial policing for investigation or to CID, depending on the severity of the crime and the risk, the threats can harm, basically as to where it should best sit. So yes, we do actively investigate those crimes and regularly obtain positive outcomes for victims. And as I said before, where we get a positive outcome through the criminal justice system, then we'll also look to use the Proceeds of Crime Act wherever we can to recover funds for victims.
Fantastic, thank you. So let's move over to see if we have any live questions now. Anything that's come through on Facebook in the last few minutes. Okay, Lucy has asked, are there any resources you can direct me to that are aimed at primary age children or teachers to share to keep them safe online, rather? There is actually a really useful campaign from the National Crime Agency called Think You Know, ThinkUKNOW. Think You Know is really useful. It has advice aimed at various age brackets. So I think it's 4 to 7, 8 to 11 to 14, and then 15 plus, because obviously we completely understand how children use devices and how to use the internet changes drastically in quite a short period of time. So that advice needs to change, and it needs to be delivered in an appropriate way too. It's all well and good, obviously, me talking about cyber safety, but I don't think I could really convey why we need strong passwords, for example, on an account to a 7-year-old very well. However, the NCA's campaign has cartoons, loads of really approachable and sort of easy to digest ways to explain the merits of strong passwords and why we don't tell people our passwords and how to stay safe online. And as you go up through those age groups, the content, like I say, it gets more, it remains appropriate and stays relevant rather. So anything from sort of 11 up, there's a lot of stuff about online gaming, how to stay safe online, not spending loads of your mum and dad's money, for example, by mistake, not giving away your credentials for your accounts. And then for the 14, 15 and upwards categories, there's advice and guidance around the sort of messages you might expect teenagers to be sending back and forth, what to do, what not to do, how to stay safe, how to report concerns that you might have as well. So that's a really, really useful campaign. And there are a few other things as well. So Google actually have some pretty good products too. I think Adventures in Cyberland is one of those things. All games that you can play online to help children learn the importance of strong passwords, not giving away too much information, making sure rather that they keep themselves safe online. There's a couple of things there for you. Like I said, I'd really recommend that Think You Know campaign from the NCA. It's some really, really good stuff on there. And actually for any parents here as well, if you've got concerns about your kids online and you're not really sure how to start those conversations, or maybe you just want to have that chat preemptively, there's advice and guidance for carers and parents that gives you a few pointers on how you can start maybe those difficult conversations, how to have conversations at a level that is going to be received well by your children too. So yeah, really worth having a look at there. Anything else? There we go. How do you set up protection on Facebook and Google? So for Facebook, things to do, privacy settings is really the best place to start. So if you have a big old friend list and there's people you want to share stuff with, obviously fine. You can filter your posts down so only certain people can see them. So if there's stuff you don't necessarily want to share, you can set who you want to be able to see that. So do that. Obviously, make sure you're only sharing with people that you want to see. Anything that you don't want people seeing publicly as well, just make sure your settings are set in such a way that only your friends or friends of friends, for example, can see what you're doing. It's really one of your strongest things. Best thing to do, obviously, as well, is if there's anything you don't want people seeing, don't share it in the first place. I know it sounds a bit of an obvious one, but you'll be amazed some of the content people put up online without really thinking about the consequences it might have for them. One of the best examples we've seen in recent years is someone sharing, admittedly, quite a nice photo around Remembrance Sunday of their grandfather. When you look at the post and the names didn't quite add up, it didn't have his surname, so the suggestion might be that would be his mum's dad. And bang, there you go. You got mother's maiden name straight away. That's one of those things that you might use for a password reset question for your online banking, for example. And so really think about what you're putting up. Try and think from that point of view of how could somebody use that against you if they wanted to. Another really good thing to do, any accounts, so your Gmail and Facebook in particular, two-factor authentication. I've touched on that already in quite a lot of detail, so we won't go over it too much again. Two-factor authentication is something that we'd recommend having on absolutely every account that you can possibly have it. There is a website where you can find some guides on how to implement 2FA on your accounts, and that's the National Cyber Security Centre's Cyber Aware campaign. So if you were to go to www.ncsc.gov.uk/cyberaware, or just cyberaware.gov.uk, I believe, for a short link, you can go there and just find guides on how to actually turn this stuff on for your accounts too. That's probably the best place to start. There are many things you can do on those accounts, obviously, but really I'd say that that's the two things that you should be looking to start with there. One more live question, and then probably about time we start looking at wrapping this up. Is it better to block junk emails or report them as phishing? Absolutely ask for it. If you have the time and you're able to, make that report. Like I say, it might seem like it's something cumbersome and a little bit of a drawn out process. It certainly used to be with the old reporting mechanisms, but now it is as simple as sending that, forwarding that rather, to report@phishing.gov.uk. Automated system there can really help clean things up. They'll shut down those scams and stop them affecting people. You won't have clicked on it, but somebody else might. And if we can get the websites at the other end of those scams shut down before they land in people's inboxes or before people click on them and go through to them, it can make a real difference to how safe things are. Text messaging as well. You get a lot of scam text messages being reported. You can report text messages to your network provider by forwarding that text message to 7726. That's a keys on your phone that would spell out the word spam. Nice, easy one to remember. So forward those text messages to 7726. Forward your emails to report@phishing.gov.uk. So probably look at wrapping things up there then. So I don't know if we want to speak anything that Adam or Andrew would like to raise before we look at wrapping things up. I'm going to pick on you here, Adam. Anything you want to raise, any positive outcomes, anything like that, anything nice?
Thanks, Chris. So I think the important thing for me, as we've spoken about tonight, is reporting to us what you are seeing, whether that be reporting it directly to Dorset Police if it's a crime in action, but also reporting to Action Fraud. So this information can be recorded. It may be that you haven't lost anything as a result of being a victim of cybercrime. However, some of the information that you may hold may be valuable in helping us look at the bigger picture or help another victim of crime. So please do report that information to us. In terms of positive jobs that the cybercrime unit have seen, we have seen many jobs, and I won't go into any great detail tonight, but I will say that we are now seizing cryptocurrency from criminals, so we are getting that money back. We've had a recent successful case where we seized about thousands of pounds, and we're also seeing cases whereby now not only we're looking to take to prosecute victims, but we're also looking at restorative justice for suspects. So we've had cases where social media accounts have been taken over, and the victim has been able to speak to the suspect in a controlled environment, but just to break down that barrier of what a cyber criminal looks like, just to reassure people that they're not necessarily as scary as you may seem. It could just be a child, essentially. So please do report information to us. Please do engage with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Andrew, before we wrap things up, any final thoughts from yourself?
Yeah, I just reiterate exactly what Adam has said. You know, it's really important that we get the information and that you report frauds and cyber crimes where they occur. That helps us to build the intelligence picture. And just a couple of really good news stories. In recent months, we've had some successful convictions of fraudsters in Dorset. Two particularly notable ones was a female who was convicted, and in September there was confiscation proceedings. She'd stolen by abusing her position in a company that she worked for. She was able to steal over £400,000 from that company. Confiscation proceedings were commenced, and we got a confiscation order against her to pay back £120,000 immediately. We can only force people to pay back what they actually have at the time, but the remainder of that order will sit with her until it's paid in full. So from any assets that she comes into in the future. And then finally, a courier fraudster who had stolen £850,000 from a victim in Dorset was convicted at Bournemouth Crown Court, and actually had sufficient assets following conviction that we were able to get a confiscation order against him for the full £850,000 to compensate the victim of that fraud. So, you know, wherever we can, that's exactly what we'll do, is that we'll use the powers we have available to us to try and compensate victims.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. And lastly, David, I'll throw it over to you for any final thoughts.
Well, thanks, Chris. Look, I think it's been really good this evening. I've certainly learnt a lot, actually, especially with my Christmas shopping still to be done. I'd like to thank you, Chris. I'd like to thank Adam. I'd like to thank Andrew. For me, the big message is reporting is key. And I think everybody's heard how passionate you are about bringing these fraudsters to justice, and also for getting the money back for the victims. I think the big thing, it's about prevention. If we all take 30 seconds to look at what we're looking at online and really thinking, is that a scam? Maybe we'll avoid some of it. So I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to thank everybody who attended this evening. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, David. And just to build on what David said there in terms of prevention, just to would like to make everyone aware, rather, of the work we do as a force to try and help keep people safe. So as part of our Cyber Protect work, we do offer free and impartial cybersecurity awareness training for businesses, charities, community groups, education, healthcare, care sector, absolutely everybody, really. If you are a representative of any of those groups, do feel free to get in touch. There is no group too small, no group too large. If you represent a group of people who you think would benefit from some sort of cyber awareness training, let us know. It'll be me. I'll come along and do it. We'll make it bespoke. We can make it fit the needs. Whatever it is that you think you need to learn about, let us know, and we can get something in the diary, and we'll come along and hopefully make you feel a little bit safer and more secure online. So with that, I think all that's left to do is to say thank you very much to our panelists, Adam, Andrew, David. Really thank you for your time. obviously the people behind the scenes, everyone who's made this possible tonight, really appreciate the efforts that you've put in. Thank you very much. Lastly, everyone who's joined us tonight to watch this. If you weren't here, obviously, to see this live, or if you want to go back over any of the points that we've raised, you can obviously rewatch this video on our social media feeds, should you want to. Fingers crossed you do. But yeah, that's everything from us tonight. Thank you very much for listening.